The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you all for taking time out today to join us for this afternoon's web presentation around everRun Monitor. My name is Boule. I'm the Director of Product Management here for Marathon Technologies, and I'm going to be bringing you through the presentation this afternoon. The presentation is going to be in two parts. I've got a handful of PowerPoint slides that I want to go through where we're going to talk specifically about the product, its positioning, how we feel like it fits into the Marathon product portfolio. We'll talk about packaging, the various purchasing options that are available for everRun Monitor, and we'll talk a little bit about competitive. And then I'll transition into an overview demonstration of the product with the option of you guys signing up for a more technical deep dive. I'll keep today's limited to an overview just in the interest of time. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we jump into it. We are recording this session, so if you miss any aspect of it or have to drop off early, or if you have a colleague that you think might be interested, we'll be making the session recording available as soon as possible. Also, if there are any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type them directly into the GoToWebinar question chat box. What I'll do is I'll be taking a few of those at the end. Any questions that I don't answer live, I will be following up with you. I do have a record here once you've typed it in of who you are and what you've asked, and I'll be able to go ahead and follow up with you one-on-one. With that said, let me go ahead and jump right in and start talking to you a little bit about everRun Monitor and our vision for proactive availability management. And this is sort of part of the way I like to open this is to sort of give you guys a sense for what was our thought process when we sort of developed this product. And I think that we have to start off by sort of recapping what it is that everRun MX does today. Really what everRun MX is it's creating a protected virtual machine. It's operating above the platform and really encompassing the Windows instance and the applications, and essentially, making them blind to any failures that may happen underneath them. Really making those two virtual machines redundant and automatically and transparently managing their availability. So, when you have a failure of a disk, or you have a failure of a network controller, or you have a failure of a server, that failure is transparent to the workload, which is the operating system and the application. So Marathon has developed everRun MX for that very specific purpose, to provide zero downtime, zero data loss to a Windows environment. Now, everRun MX does ship with some monitoring capabilities. Specifically, when I think about these, I think about, oops, let me go ahead and just fix the PowerPoint presentation here. Just bear with me for a moment. And there we go. We seem to be back in business. Just hide this. So as I was saying, Marathon does ship with its share of monitoring capabilities. Specifically, when we talk about monitoring capabilities, I'm talking about our everRun Availability Center. And what the Availability Center is going to do for you is really give you a sense for PVM states, virtual device states. We're going to push out SNMP notifications, again, that relate to PVM and virtual device states, and then fault management and recovery. All of that information can be gleaned from the EAC. But really, we're focused on just that, the health and welfare of that protected virtual machine, the actual components of that protected virtual machine as it's running on our platform. What we want to do, and sort of where you want to go with this, we want to make sure that we add elements to this. So we want to make sure that with everRun Monitor, we're adding monitoring for server and physical devices. we're looking at the hypervisor, we're looking at the operating system, we're looking at the application. This is really where we need to go with this tool, and ultimately that's where we feel like we're delivering with the everRun Monitor solution. Now, we talked a little bit about the monitoring current feature set. And again, we're looking at processing of state changes for a protected virtual machine. So if your protected virtual machine experiences a component level loss or a server dies, you will see that reflected in the EAC. You'll also get an SNMP trap. We're going to push those state changes out via SNMP. And the problem there for most customers is that they require an SNMP server to catch those traps and process those alerts. And one of the key features around everRun Monitor is its ability to act as both a receiver and processor of SNMP alerts and a publisher of SNMP alerts. So you can go through the process of capturing an alert, an SNMP trap message, processing that alert, and then ultimately, as one of the calls to action for that alert, it could be passing the SNMP trap message up to an enterprise framework or some other point in your network to go ahead and make sure that that message is received properly. Some of the challenges that we looked at when customers were sort of talking to us about what they were looking for in a monitoring tool, they are challenges that extend beyond the protected virtual machine, and I think that's going to be the theme of the presentation today, is really sort of looking beyond the protected virtual machine and giving you the ability to go ahead and see what's happening both inside and outward and around the protected virtual machine. So looking at things like host instability, loss of performance, low host memory, or insufficient application storage. We'll be looking at things like network throughput, a loss of application services. And these are all things that what we've realized is that customers are aware that they should be doing as it relates to both real-time monitoring and sort of doing forensic work around trying to figure out what may have happened. However, when you look at things like data and application logs, these things are scattered all over the place. Correlation of events within these logs is a very complex process, and generally speaking requires some specialized skills. So when you have a problem, you go ahead and you send the logs off to the vendor. The vendor has folks on that side that will try and analyze that for you. What we want to do is we want to bubble the root cause of these issues up to the surface. And by proactively alerting you to these issues, get out in front of those problems before they impact your environment. One of the reasons that you're running everRun MX in theory is that you don't want to have a failure create a loss of service to the application that you're running. So being out in front of these challenges, being out in front of these problems, and being able to repair them before they've had an impact on production is the key. Now, in talking to customers and going out and doing some market research around a tool like this, we found that generally customers fell into one of three personas. One is the customer that reacts. They essentially don't do anything from a proactive nature when it comes to looking at their environment. They wait for an issue to occur and they simply respond to it. And more often than not, they generally regret that posture. We've got the use the homegrown or platform-based solutions. These are the customers that are cobbling together solutions from either the freeware pool or using things like a combination of, say, Zen Center and some other tool, or a bunch of utility-grade point products that are going to look at network bandwidth or log analyzers. The problem here is that you're forced to sort of cobble together a solution yourself. And you may have a handful of point products that you could use to do this, but there's really no sort of bringing all that information together. There's no correlation. There's no sort of single pane of glass for monitoring. And then you've got customers that are out there that will be using the larger enterprise frameworks. Now, these are solutions that they've spent millions of dollars in some cases implementing. And so our expectation is not that the customer will rip these out. And while they are large and complex tool sets, they're usually been put in for a purpose. And what we're pitching customers at this point is that everRun Monitor really sort of lives inside of that framework. And from the perspective of making an easy to use, easy to configure tool that's going to monitor everRun MX and allow you to, out of the box, have all of the alerting capabilities and everything set up for you so that we've already done the work to identify those key points in an MX installation that need to be monitored. You don't have to think about it. You simply install the product and it works from there. So those folks that are using those enterprise frameworks, we feel there's an appeal to sort of let everRun Monitor act as the middleman and be able to process alerts associated with their MX install. Now, the question we've asked ourselves, and we went out and asked customers, is what's required to achieve comprehensive availability management? What do we need to do in order to be successful? And I think the answers were relatively straightforward. We need to be able to look at the application, the operating system, the hypervisor, the server, and all of the edge devices. And when I talk about edge devices, I mean IP-based door panels, security cameras, remote sensors, or workstations, or database clients, or anything that's out on the edge that's consuming data or pushing data up to the protected workload. We need to simplify, automate, and integrate. So we need to have obviously simple fault management and fault recovery, which we've accomplished with everRun MX in the EAC, and then monitoring and reporting. So we want to be able to make sure that if you do have a disk fail on a RAID set, or if you do have a temperature sensor that's gone off, or a power supply fail on your piece of hardware, or you have an application that is performing poorly, or an application service has stalled, we want to make sure that you know about that. We want to proactively identify performance bottlenecks, throughput issues, and those impending causes of failure. And when I talk about impending causes of failure, when I talk to customers about MX, and we discuss sort of what happens when they've deployed an MX system and they're able to stick it in the corner and it just runs. But what will happen is if you don't keep an eye on that, it's not the first failure or the second failure or even the third or fourth that could potentially impact you, because through the redundancy of everRun MX, you're going to ride through all those failures. But if you start getting into the sixth, the seventh, the eighth failure, if you have 3 disks fail in a RAID set, and you have a network adapter fail on the other side, and you have a server overheat, all of these things will add up to and eventually bring your system down. And so we want to make sure that you see those and have visibility into those impending causes of failure and can take a proactive approach. And so, that brings us to what is proactive availability management. And I think that in a nutshell, it's the ability to measure, monitor, correlate, and then react to environmental issues. So to react to problems with physical resources, to react to problems with the hypervisor, to react to entries that are made to a system log, to react to problems within the OS or the application services and edge devices. So to be able to have, sort of a full 360-degree view of all of these elements and be able to know what's happening with them and be proactively monitored when there's a problem, or alerted, I should say. And that really led to the introduction of everRun Monitor. And really what we're talking about here is a proactive, comprehensive monitoring solution for the entire software and hardware environment, including those critical edge devices. Now, what we're doing here is we're packaging these things up so that, it's got both agent and agentless monitoring capabilities. Our agents are going to be deployed, pre-configured to be able to monitor an everRun MX system. We're also going to extend the monitoring capabilities and allow customers to be able to monitor things outside of the realm of everRun MX. So if they have a VMware installation, Hyper-V installation, we'll allow them to use this product to go ahead and monitor those elements as well. And again, guys, I think the pre-configure with critical alerts for everRun MX is really a differentiator when we start talking about competitive here in a few minutes. I'm going to get into some of the things that set us apart, but I think that if a customer is going to deploy a monitoring tool and it doesn't have alerts that are pre-configured or is not pre-configured to monitor an MX installation, they're going to be challenged with trying to figure out what they should be looking at. We've already done the work here for that with everRun Monitor. And so ultimately what we're doing is we're looking to extend those or expand those everRun monitoring capabilities, that MX monitoring capabilities that we talked about earlier. And go beyond just the processing of state changes and looking really intently at the protected virtual machine. What we want to do now is open this up so that we're looking at the applications, processes, resource consumption. We're looking at, we have the ability to look at downstream networking gear. So we can look at those managed switches and tell you what's going on inside of those. We can look at things like the baseboard monitoring tools and monitor those. We can look at, the lights out cards and make sure those are functioning. And we can monitor all these things both from within a PVM or within a VM and from the outside as well. As one of the things I'm going to show you is we've got an availability monitor built into this tool that's going to constantly run a series of tests and constantly be probing your environment to make sure that it's available. Not only are we going to be doing that, but we're collecting all this other process and service and application information to make sure all that's functioning as it's supposed to as well. So, when we look at everRun Monitor, we're talking about out-of-the-box monitoring with everRun MX. Things like all of the availability manager logs that get logged in the event logs of a protected virtual machine. We're looking at the component level failures via the SNMP trap messages, and we're looking at all the critical hypervisor components. So we're really sort of packaging this together so that it's an out-of-the-box monitor for everRun MX, while giving you the ability to go deeper and wider with the tool that we're going to provide you in terms of being able to monitor things that are going on inside of the protected virtual machine and throughout the rest of the protected virtual machine ecosystem. Some of the other things that we're monitoring, things like baseboard devices, so fans, temperature sensors, voltage sensors, network devices, I mentioned switches, routers, etc. Data center components, so APC units, heating and cooling units, printers, physical storage, all of those critical edge devices, and then ultimately applications, databases, and operating systems as well. So this really sort of rounds out exactly what it is that we're monitoring from that perspective. So with that said, guys, let me go ahead and transition away from the positioning piece here, and let's talk a little bit about the actual packaging of this thing, so you can kind of get a flavor for how this is going to work from a packaging perspective. And what we've done is put together a handful of packages for our customers so that they can leverage this tool and be able to ultimately look at the best sort of options for them. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to make it as simple as possible for the customer to be able to order. So we start off with looking at the MX local configuration package. And so if a customer that you're talking to has purchased everRun MX and they decide they want monitoring, they don't have to look at a 500 element pick list and try and figure out what they should order. We're putting together a very basic package for them to monitor an MX local configuration for new and existing MX customers. So here we're going to be monitoring agentlessly. We'll be looking at the 2 Zen server hosts. We're going to be agentlessly monitoring one managed switch, 2 agents to deploy inside of DOM0, and 3 agents for their protected virtual machines. And they're going to get this as a package. And your authorized dealer or distributor will be able to give you the pricing around this, but this is what the package would look like. So if they're going ahead and wanting to order a local configuration, again, they can simply pick that local configuration for monitoring and get what they need. Now they could also augment this with our component level monitoring as well. So we do offer that large pick list. So if they've got different elements they want to monitor, or if they want to monitor elements like log on and log off in a security environment, they certainly can choose that from our pick list. Let me move to the next. The next is, oops, going a little far, the everRun MX split site configuration. And again, for those customers that are ordering split site, we wanted to come up with a monitoring package that was going to be set for them as well, and something that they could order along with that split site piece to go ahead and monitor all those elements. And here, again, they're getting the agentless monitoring of the 2 Zen hosts, the agentless monitoring of 2 managed switches. They're getting 2 agents for DOM0, 1 on each Zen host, 3 agents for their protected virtual machines, and 2 agents to monitor quorum services. So again, this split site package is providing them with what they need. It certainly can be augmented if the customer chooses, but the important thing to remember here, guys, is this gets the customer started. So we want to make sure that they have a SKU that they can order so they can marry their everRun install with a monitoring package and simply move forward from there. And we've done the same thing with Extend. So with Extend, we're providing a package so that if they're using this, to go ahead and create a DR scenario, we're giving them what they need to be able to monitor all the components of an Extend install as well, including, in this time, 3 Zen hosts, assuming that they have a Zen host at the DR side, 2 managed switches, 2 agents for DOM0, and then 3 agents for protected virtual machines. And again, guys, this is designed specifically for those customers that are going to be implementing Extend and want to be able to monitor all of those critical elements. And we've got, as you're going to see during the demo, the pre-configured alerts already set up to monitor all of these elements for a customer. And then we have our component ordering, our per device pricing. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're opening this up so that the customer can not only monitor their MX install, but they can monitor any piece of their infrastructure. So if they have a VMware installation, if they have a Hyper-V installation, they can monitor that as well, or they can simply choose to just purchase everRun Monitor just for that purpose. So we would like to make sure we extend that offer of proactive availability even to folks that aren't necessarily running an MX environment right now. And so we're very excited to be able to do that and sort of really give you guys, as our key partners, the ability to go in and really sell the customer on that element of proactive availability, look at our suite of products and really sort of identify what their needs are. And plugging in some of those needs with Monitor, I think, is really going to help in terms of getting the message out there. So with that said, and we're going to save Q&A for last, let me bring up the competitive piece as well. And so, I didn't want to, do a presentation here without at least talking about, at a high level, some of the competitive pieces that you might see out there and really sort of helping you understand where Monitor is going to fit in to that competitive environment. So, one of the things that in some of these slides, guys, I used with our internal sales organization as well. And I wanted to make sure that we made some of these points, so I sort of left some of this stuff in here. But really, when you think about why this product is different, from the traditional marathon lineup, really we're selling guys into what could be looked at as a commodity market. There's a lot of monitoring products out there. And I think that identifying pain in terms of a customer is going to be key in terms of being able to successfully sell this. Now, if the customer is running an MX environment, that's a different situation. They are, certainly in a situation where they are looking for something that maybe is going to monitor those specific MX elements. But if they're looking to go beyond that, there's a lot of choices for these customers, and that's what really makes this product different. When we designed this product, when we set out to put this product together, we really wanted to focus on closing the gaps. So if you look at what's out there in the monitoring space, you've got a grouping of sort of freeware, SMB type, small point products that are designed to do something very, very specific. In the middle, you probably have, your hypervisor-based, sort of agentless monitoring tools. And then on the high end, you have your legacy vendors, your really large enterprise frameworks, or those products that have been out there that were set up to monitor hardware specifically. And so what we were looking to do is create a product that really sort of fills in a lot of those gaps and eliminates a lot of the blind spots that you'll bump into if you were to implement one or two of these tools. We want to make sure that we get out in front of that. So the competitive strategies here are pretty straightforward. And in terms of the value of the product itself, it's really essential to uncover that pain. And again, if you're in an MX environment, it's very simple. They want additional visibility into that MX platform. We have a unique value proposition there. But outside of that, it's going to be very important to try and understand what the customer is doing for monitoring and being proactive about availability management and looking to see if we can plug some of those holes with the functionality that you're going to see this afternoon. This is a crowded market, so I don't think I'd be shocking anyone by telling you that there are a lot of vendors in the monitoring space. It's a very, very crowded market, and a lot of times when you talk to customers, they are going to think that they have the tools that they need. It's not until you start asking questions and really sort of identifying needs that you're going to get to a point where you can actually pitch this to them. Again, if they're running MX, we have the benefit of that unique value proposition here. But anyone outside of that, you're really going to want to make sure you identify pains and really plug those pains in based on your knowledge of the product. Now, some of the things that, and I think that one of the biggest pieces here that we run into whenever we talk to customers is they'll state that, they already have a monitoring tool, and it's, and I'll name a few names here, tools like Veeam or, vkernel or something along those lines, which are very, very good tools. They're certainly not tools that, you can complain about. They do what they do, and they do it very, very well. However, one of the things that we've used to sort of set ourselves apart here is we go beyond the hypervisors. So those traditional tools, you'll see the gray box there. They're looking at the hypervisor. They're scanning the storage. They're looking at the virtual machines, and they're going to be able to tell you that memory's good, CPU's good, disk is good, process is good. So everything that makes up the virtual machine container is going to report as good. Now, the problem with that is that they don't have any visibility into the protected virtual machine or the virtual machine. They're not going to be able to tell you if the database is unavailable or the SQL service is hung, or if there's a potentially dangerous log in the event log, or if there's low process utilization for a particular process. You'd expect something to be going on that's not. They're just going to tell you the state of the VM. They're not inside of that protected virtual machine looking at what's going on and helping you understand what's happening. That's where everRun Monitor is going to be able to set itself apart from that class of monitoring tools. And if you take a look at, sort of what the competitive landscape looks like around this, you'll notice that, we've got sort of cost on the on one side and scalability and functionality on the other. And, down in the lower left-hand corner, we're looking at some of the freeware offerings and some of the point products that I talked about earlier. And as you move to the right, you start looking at, a slight increase in cost and then an increase in scalability and functionality. And as you keep moving up, you eventually run into, the enterprise level frameworks that I talked about earlier. And you see everRun Monitor sort of where we think everRun Monitor fits in to this, sort of positioning scope, at a reasonable cost, but also giving you the scalability and functionality to look both inside of the virtual machine, look at the virtual platform, and then look at the ecosystem that surrounds the virtual platform, including things like edge devices, and making sure that you've got, a lot of visibility into what's happening all around you in order to be able to proactively manage the availability of your system. So when we talk about, these classes of monitoring tools that are out there, and we look at things like enterprise frameworks, the title of this probably shouldn't be why everRun Monitor wins, specifically as it relates to enterprise frameworks, because I do not believe, and I think you would agree that we're going to convince a customer who's just done a large deployment of the CA monitoring tool, an enterprise level monitoring tool, to rip that out. However, the important piece here from a positioning perspective is to understand that everRun Monitor can work within that framework. So our ability to go ahead and be pre-configured with alerts for MX, or to have a rules engine that is very simple and powerful to go ahead and configure to monitor, specific assets within an environment, and then ultimately hand those alerts up to an enterprise framework, make us a viable solution to work inside of those customer shops who are running those large frameworks. The virtual only, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at vkernel, EG Innovations, VM Turbo, Veeam, vFoglite. Again, coming from someone that's used these products in the past, all very good products. However, they stop at the virtualization layer. They are not inside the VM. They're not collecting deep metrics inside of the VM. They're not monitoring performance inside the VM. They're not outside the VM looking at networking gear, looking at edge devices. They're not doing any of that. Whereas that's the gap here from a virtual only perspective that we're looking to fill. And then you've got your networks and physical monitoring tools. And these are, again, great tools in their own right. They do exactly what they say they're going to do. Unfortunately, you need to piece together and string together a handful of these things in order to make a comprehensive solution. There's no sort of one tool that you're going to pick off here that's going to do everything that you need it to. And we like to think, and what we're pitching customers on is that everRun Monitor is going to approach giving you that sort of one tool, one pane of glass to monitor an entire environment. So, again, talking about enterprise solutions and support for the virtual environment, looking at those enterprise solutions and how they're architected. If you look hard enough and you ask enough questions of the customer, there's a real good chance you'll find a fit for everRun Monitor inside of those frameworks. Even if it's nothing more than being able to reduce their overall cost in terms of on a per device piece to reduce the cost of monitoring on a per device level. Because we're able to go ahead and monitor on a per device level and our costs are much lower, we could potentially create an ROI around being able to do the same type of monitoring while allow them to go ahead and continue to exercise and utilize their enterprise framework. And because we're so simple to deploy and set up, again, we're going to create some additional value there. Looking at, again, the virtual server monitoring, and again, when we talk about this stuff, we're talking about, it goes back to that slide I reviewed a few minutes ago where, back up here, where we talk about, stopping at the hypervisor, just looking at the hypervisor. We have actually included that as an element of our monitoring product. We actually have that level of agentless monitoring, which you're going to see during the demo. However, we take it one step further in that we get inside of the monitored entity, inside of the virtual machine, and collect those deep metrics that these guys just simply cannot get for you. So we're going to get you the hypervisor, the guest operating systems. We're going to get you all of the, because we deploy this intelligent agent, all of the application level bits that you're just not going to get from just some of these traditional virtual server monitoring pieces. And then I talked about the networking and hardware-based pieces. These are, again, great little point products, but in order to be comprehensive, you'll need to gather a bunch of these and sort of roll your own monitoring solution. That's okay in that it provides a level of flexibility, but boy, it can be awfully tough to try and get multiple vendors to work together to provide you with the information you need. It can be awfully tough to stay in sync and stay up to date with what these vendors are doing in terms of their products. And, it can be awfully tough to have 3 or 4 different support numbers to call if you have a problem. So I think that, from that perspective, we're really looking at a comprehensive solution that can overlay a lot of what a lot of these point products will do. And then we've put together a couple of matrices here, guys, and we're going to make this available to you, these PowerPoints available to you, along with a recording of this session. We'll make all this available to you via the partner portal. But really getting this information out to you so that you can, at a glance, maybe print these off and be able to talk intelligently to customers about, what certain products do and don't do and what everRun Monitor can do. And so we go over to the second page here to try and help you understand exactly what it is that these competitive products do versus everRun Monitor. And we know we just sort of scratched the surface with some of this stuff, but this is our attempt at sort of arming you with the information you need to be able to go out and talk to these customers intelligently and be able to respond when they say, I'm using What's Up Gold, or I'm using, Zen Center to do some of this stuff. We want to go ahead and make sure that you're armed with the information you need to be able to understand where we can bring additional value. So, guys, with that said, and I did want to get through the PowerPoint of this as quickly as possible so we could spend time in the actual demo, because I think the demo itself is pretty powerful, and I want to spend the last 15 or 20 minutes on the demo and then save some time for questions. The product itself, just to sort of talk a little bit about the architecture, you generally are going to install this somewhere on the network, and it's going to be installed on a machine. It could be a dedicated server. It could be, a workstation. The back end of this is a SQL Server database. Now, if you don't have a SQL Server database running in your environment, we actually ship with a copy of SQL Express that will lay itself down at install and allow you to go ahead and use that as a data collector. Once you've got the product installed, stood up and running, you can access the dashboards here from any browser. So it's a browser-based interface. I usually like to start here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off at the dashboard itself, because what I want to do is review with you the various elements that we're monitoring. And then we can work our way backwards to deployment. And let me just turn the sound down here so we don't hear the beeping of the alerts. And so ultimately what we can do here is work our way backwards to the deployment scenarios. But I want to start off by reviewing what exactly it is that we're monitoring here. So we start off with virtual hosts. And in this case here, guys, I've got a 2-host everRun MX pool set up that I'm monitoring. And the servers are Fred and George. So these are my physical hosts. If you look here at some of the icons, you can see the representation that it is a host or a server. It's running Xen. Its current alert status is green. And I've got a drill down here. If I want to get into some device metrics, I can quickly from the dashboard get into some of the device resource metrics here in terms of things like CPU, memory, storage space. And then if I scroll down here, I'm looking at networking and throughput issues. So I can get into that very quickly from the dashboard, but I'm monitoring this here as part of an agentless package. So what I'm doing is as part of the configuration of the tool that we'll go back to in just a moment, I'm telling the everRun Monitor server where the either the pool master is or where my virtual center server is in my environment, so that I can start grabbing this information and being able to bring this information into the tool and start applying my monitoring rules to the data that this collects. And as you can see here, I also can get access to any alerts that happen to take place here. In this case, I had a patrol read that started that's recently stopped, so I received an SNMP trap message around that on that server. But again, I'm looking at this from the server perspective, the virtual host perspective. So if I'm doing things like capacity planning and I want to see what the resource utilization looks like here, if I can do I have capacity to add additional VMs? I can look at the last 12 hours. I can look at the last 5 days. I can look at the last 3 months to sort of get some trending information and give myself some sense for what type of headroom I have available on these servers to be able to add additional virtual machines or additional protected virtual machines as I look at the resources here. And then as we move down, we're going to get into the virtual machine aspect of this. And again, this next element that we're monitoring is agentlessly monitored as well. This is really what you're getting when you go out and purchase one of those virtual-only monitoring tools, is the ability to scan the hosts and to be able to pick up the virtual machines. Now, in our environment, because we're running an MX environment here, we're getting something a little different than you might expect. Here, I'm capturing all of the availability managers and the non-protected virtual machines I'm going to get in this particular section. So I'm being able to monitor the AMs. For those of you that are familiar with MX, you know that our availability manager is where all of our fault handling logic and IO redirects exist. And it's really what stands in the IO path between the operating system and the hypervisor to make sure that we can seamlessly fail components. That availability manager is a critical piece of the everRun MX install, and so we want to make sure we monitored it. So we picked it up here. The actual virtual machines themselves are going to be monitored through an agent that we're going to push out to them, and we'll get down to those in just a moment. The other piece that I'm monitoring here is the storage. So in this case here, I'm looking at the storage devices. Now, I don't have any shared storage. I simply have local storage in this MX pair, but I could simply click on the local storage here and get some very detailed statistics about what the status is of the storage, how much is being used, how much do I have left, how is it being used. So, is the storage being used? What virtual machines are running on here? As I can see here, I've got 65% of the storage is being used by VMs and templates. I've got 4% being consumed by snapshots, 19% being used by uncoalesced virtual devices, so virtual disks, and 12% being used by orphan virtual disks. So again, I get a nice overview of what's being utilized and how it's being utilized from a storage perspective. And then as I keep moving down here, I start moving into now my server-based or virtual-based agent monitoring. And so here in this section, guys, I've got agents deployed to my protected virtual machines, along with DOM0 or the control domain in my Zen server. So I've got both Fred and George. I've got a agent deployed inside of the control domain so that I can very easily see what's being utilized for resources in the control domain. I can look at things like the storage of the control domain, how much storage it has left available to it. I can, in the event that, you have a rogue process writing logs, I can monitor this. I can monitor for the response of the control domain. So I can make sure that from an availability perspective, the control domain is continuing to respond. I can telnet into it. I can do any of the things that I want to do to make sure that it's still responding and it's still alive. That's one aspect of this. The other aspect is the agents deployed to the actual virtual machines themselves, or the protected virtual machines themselves. And again, I get the same window into the PVM that I get into every other monitored element. I come in here and look at resource consumption. I come in here and look at what's happening with the disk, the network, the CPU, the memory. I can look at the trending information around these resource utilization. And I can also monitor the actual device availability state. So this is interesting in that, one of the things that I'll be showing you a little later is sort of an availability dashboard. And one of the things that's key to this product is our ability to interrogate these monitored entities from outside of the ecosystem. So I can make sure that the protected virtual machine is still responding to pings. I can make sure that the agent is still up. If the agent doesn't respond, then I can make some assumptions around whether or not the virtual machine is still there. I can do things like actually log into SQL, and I'll be showing you that in just a few minutes, my ability to go ahead and log into SQL. As a matter of fact, let me pop over there right now and pop open a virtual machine that I'm running SQL Server in. So this is another, example of how we've got an agent inside of this virtual machine. So not only am I able to look at the actual SQL Server services and the processes that are spawned from that service and the resources that are consumed, but I'm actually able to configure my my monitoring server as a SQL client and have it proactively log into the database and make sure that it's continually able to log into the database. And if it doesn't, and as you can see here, I had a little bit of downtime here where it lost, a ping or lost one time was not able to log in. So either the SQL Server database was busy or was simply down. I can also get a look at what the average response time is to that login request. So I can see if I've got some latency issues. So again, being able to go ahead and monitor these things from both inside and outside the protected virtual machine, and adding that to the overall availability story is really what we're trying to accomplish here with everRun Monitor. Now, as we continue down the stack here, as you saw, I've got my agents deployed to my protected virtual machines. I then get down to the next agentless monitoring section, which is going to be network and storage devices. So here, I've got monitoring happening for a switch. So there's a managed switch in my environment. What I'm doing here with this is I'm going to be able to collect statistics around this particular switch on a port by port basis. So not only am I going to be able to look at traffic flowing through this port, average latency of traffic flowing through this port, but also something as simple as the port's operational status. If the port were to go down or if the port weren't to function, I would know about it. If I want to monitor or collect performance counters from this switch, I'll show you how to do that in just a moment as well. But all of these things can be done through just telling the everRun Monitor server where that switch is. We'll go out and gather the rest of the information that's needed and allow you to start to create and build monitoring rules around this data. The other things that I'm monitoring here, just as by way of example, is I've got a couple of iDRAC cards in these servers. I'm monitoring these DRAC cards in a couple of different ways. I'm making sure that they're still there by pinging them, but I'm also actually having the everRun monitor server log into the web page that is the interface for the DRAC card to make sure that's continually available. People talk about the importance of these lights out, cards all the time, and that it's the only real way to be able to remotely administer a server. Well, if they're that critical a part of your infrastructure, you really should be monitoring them. And then I've got a network printer here that I just, for giggles here, decided to add just to show you the depth of the product and the ability to go ahead and monitor all elements. So now that we've sort of got a sense for all that I'm monitoring here, and I've kind of set the stage, I want to take a step back and talk to you a little bit about configuration. Now, the product itself, once you've got it installed on a machine, the next thing you're going to want to do is tell it, where are those virtual elements that you want to monitor, assuming you've got some. In this case, if you had an MX platform, you would. You simply click on Citrix Zen Server, as I'm going to do here, and click on the Launch Wizard. What it's going to do is it's going to ask me for the IP address of my pool master, in which case, once it has that, it will go out and find all the hosts in that pool. It'll allow me to go ahead and set a default collector, in which case this is my, I'm just going to use the default collector here that I've got set up, which is my monitoring server, and ultimately go through the process of setting it up so that now I can agentlessly monitor those Zen hosts and get all of that information that I showed you earlier without having to deploy an agent to the host, which is a nice aspect, because once that data is on the server, once I start collecting that information, I then are able to set up monitoring rules around that and then set up alerting. If I want to deploy agents, and again, this is a very simple process, and if you're going to be monitoring protected virtual machines, this is how you would do it. You'd simply come in here and click on the Install Agent button, and it would launch you into this wizard. I can go out and discover those virtual machines or the physical devices simply by going through and answering a couple of questions. Do I want to do discovery on servers and or workstations? Do I want to just discover the virtual machines running on the platforms that I've already discovered? So I've already agentlessly discovered a VM, a Zen server pool. Do I want to just focus on those VMs? Or do I want to discover based on a domain or an IP address and subnet? So I can do all those things, and once I've discovered all those through the network discovery protocols, I can then go ahead and deploy my agents to that protected virtual machine or that monitored entity. So that's how you're going to get agents out to those machines. The other things that you can monitor here, obviously, are things like applications and databases. We're going to talk about that in just a minute as we move over to monitoring rules. The network is as simple as adding the IP addresses of your networking gear. So all of your managed switches, you want to go ahead and monitor those simply in the inventory tab that I'll show you in just a moment. You simply add those IP addresses, configure them for port bandwidth monitoring, and you're going to start on a port by port basis gathering all of that information. So it's not just going to be something where we're randomly pinging the switch to make sure it's still there. We're doing that, but we're also making sure that on a port by port basis, you're not reaching a saturation point. You're not reaching a point where you can no longer accept traffic or it becomes a bottleneck. We're monitoring things like physical storage. So all of your iSCSI boxes, all of your fiber channel boxes that are living on the network. And then all of those data center components, temperature sensors, battery backup devices, air conditioning units, surge suppressors, any edge devices like cameras, door sensors, tags, all of those things can be monitored as long as they've got an IP address. So once you've gone through that process, the next thing you're presented with, obviously, is the inventory screen. And the inventory screen provides you with a couple of different elements here. One, it's a nice overview of everything that's monitored. It's certainly designed differently than the dashboard, but it's really designed to be a listing of everything that you have in your inventory that you're currently monitoring. And if you look here, anything that's got a green box next to it with a version number next to it means I've deployed an agent to that entity. When you look at a given entity, you can come in here and edit it. where I can go ahead and give it a friendly name. I mean, it's going to grab the name of the monitored system anyway, but I can go ahead and grab the name that I want to use for this, or give it a specific name for the purposes of monitoring. I can go ahead and basically identify the IP address. If I have multiple IPs in there and I want to monitor on a separate IP, I certainly can do that. I can give it a group assignment if I want. I can also do things like have it act as a master agent for those distributed environments where, if you're trying to monitor something at a remote location and you don't want to deploy a monitor server there, you can simply designate one agent as a master agent, and it will monitor all of the agents running in that location, and then just that master agent will report back to the everRun monitor server. The other thing I can do here is I can come through and I can go ahead and configure the availability testing that is done for this particular device. Now, in this case here, we've turned on ping, so it's going to go ahead and ping that IP address to make sure it's available. I can turn on things like HTTP, which is going to go ahead and tell it, go out, there's some IIS pages here, there's some web pages being hosted on this box, log into that, tell me that you were able to successfully log in. I gave you the example of SQL Server, where I've identified the name of a database, I've identified the username and password for the database, and now I'm acting as a SQL client. I'm actually able to log into the database and make sure that that database continues to be available to clients, not just that the services are running, but it's actually available to clients. Some of the other things I can do here, I can go ahead and update the agent, and I can actually make this agent a remote SNMP trap collector as well. So again, a lot of things that I can do here with this particular entity as I set it up for monitoring. Now, as you go through here and set all these things up, the next step in the process, obviously, is going to be defining some of your monitoring rules. Now, this is really where it gets interesting for MX customers, because we've sat down with our engineering group and actually put together a whole host of rules that are going to come shipped out of the box for this particular product, specific to everRun MX. And you can see them listed here if you look closely. And ultimately, these rules are all been predefined and configured. They just need to be tweaked a little bit for the customer to make sure that the alert actually goes to them by identifying things like their email address or what remediation action they may want to take. But the rest of these rules also ship with the product and ultimately are designed to do some of the basics in terms of monitoring. But the real power of the tool is the customer's ability to go ahead and actually configure their own set of rules for their environment. So we've taken, a subset of rules and created them for an MX environment. We've also taken another subset of rules and tried to identify all the things that a general IT practitioner might want to monitor. But when you get down to it, every environment's different. There are different applications running. There are off-the-shelf applications. There are custom applications. Everybody's got sort of a different way of doing things. And so we've got this system set up where you can create a series of watches or rules. Now, I'm going to drill into one of these in just a moment, but I just want to run through these with you real quick. We've got event log watches, which, as the name implies, is going to monitor the event logs for Windows. We've got Windows Services watches, so you can assign the agent to monitor a given service. This is nice if you want to watch a service for a custom application. You can define that right here. A process watch, so any of the processes that get spawned from those services, if I want to go ahead and monitor the process and I want to go ahead and set some thresholds around what type of resources those processes should be consuming, I can do that here. Let me get back in there real quick. A file watch. So a file watch is another very powerful tool, and I'll tell you how we've seen it used. To do things like monitor logs that are non-Windows event logs. So if I've got, say, for example, XenHost logs, I can set up file watch where it will go ahead and look for a specific search string. So I tell it a path or a directory, and it will look at all the files in that directory for a particular search string that I give it. It will also look at, so that's nice in terms of if you're looking for, generic messages like errors in your storage subsystem, you can go ahead and configure that. The other thing this can do from a security perspective is help you lock down files in the environment. So if you want to monitor a file for every time it's accessed, or every time it changes size, or every time it's been copied, or every time or if it's been deleted, or if it's been copied into a subfolder, or anything that happens to a file here, you can identify that change. You can alert on that change from a security perspective. Coming back to the master list here, things like Counterwatch. Counterwatch is very powerful in that I'm going to show you some of the performance graphing that we can do with the product. But during that graphing process, you're going to identify performance counters that you want to monitor. And when you come into Counterwatch, it's going to allow you to go ahead and select any of these performance counters that you want to set a threshold around, and you want to go ahead and monitor. So it's going to allow you to go ahead and do that very, very basic monitoring from that perspective, but say, hey, if you see a counter that exceeds this, I want to make sure I know about it. Then we get down into our virtualization monitoring. So our VMware Virtual Watch, our Citrix Virtual Watch. Those are our agentless virtual watches. You've got things like Agent Watch or Syslog Watch, which is going to monitor syslog events. One of the nice things about the everRun Monitor server is it can act as a centralized server for all of your system logs. So you can redirect logs to this server, and we've got a very robust archiving utility in the product as well, so that you can maintain, archive, search, and monitor on log events. The same thing with SNMP trap messages. So if you want to go ahead and act as a SNMP trap collector and processor, or if you want to publish SNMP trap messages as well. But to get back to some of the details around a watch, obviously you define the core watch itself and what you want it to do. You're also going to go ahead and be able to set a schedule around this. So if I want the watch to be turned off during a known maintenance period, I can do that here. So I'm not getting constantly notified of something that I already know is happening. I can go ahead and send out an email or a text message here. I can send out an SNMP trap message. So this is nice if you're running inside of an enterprise framework. You want to pass an alert up to that framework. I can go ahead and write an entry to a syslog or a remote syslog server. Again, another integration point for an enterprise level monitoring framework. And then I've got my ability to go ahead and dial out in the event that I'm in a remote location. I can go ahead and dial out here if I need to as well. And then the last tab on the sort of the events or the monitoring rules is a remediation tab. So here we're going to go ahead and allow you to set up some automated remediation if you would like. As an example, we had a customer a few weeks back that was using this, and they were able to monitor and identify a memory leak, and they saw high memory utilization associated with a specific process. And it basically kept eroding the overall memory that was available in the system. Their vendor wasn't going to have a fix for a couple of weeks. So what they did was they were able to simply go ahead and identify the watch as a looking for that particular memory consumption rate of a process, and then ultimately go ahead and run a script here that simply restarted the service and basically eliminated that problem. And they did it during an off-hour event. So again, you're able to remediate these things through scripting, through a simple reboot of the virtual machine. All of those things can be done right here from this screen or this wizard. Now, once you've gone ahead and configured all this stuff, obviously you're now ready to go ahead and monitor, and that's really what the dashboard's all about. The dashboard is just a view into what's happening here, and so I've got a file watch set up on George to monitor its storage subsystem error logs. So I can go ahead and monitor this and be able to get some insight of what's happening here. We've got some very basic monitoring screens around things like CPU. So people want to know who are the big consumers or who's using a lot of the core 4 resources. So we've got CPU, we've got memory, and we've got storage. So again, really, really basic in terms of the ability to go ahead and monitor these things at a glance. And then we have our availability panel, and this is really where this is the sort of inflection point where we tie together this product with everything else that Marathon does. One of the things that's always nice here is to be able to come into a demo and show a customer all of the failures that they can introduce to their MX platform, but then bounce over here and look at all their services remain available. Look at the pings continuing to happen, the ability to log into the DRAC cards, the ability to go ahead and log into SQL Server. So the ability to go ahead and continue to do all these things despite failures. And so I know about the failures. I know that they've happened, so I can take a proactive approach to repairing them. But I'm also here looking at, in real time, all the tests that are being run to actively probe my environment and to make sure that these things are responding. And if they're not responding, to raise a flag and tell somebody that they're not responding so that I can minimize the impact, minimize the downtime, or minimize the potential impact that I'm going to have on the ecosystem in general. I mentioned our ability to capture SNMP traps. Those traps are generally assigned to a device as part of a rule. But if you want to just look here at a dashboard of all the SNMP trap messages received in the last 24 hours, you can do that here. And then ultimately, you can do things like monitor the registry inside of a Windows virtual machine. So I want to go ahead and monitor a specific registry key here. No problem, piece of cake. I've got the key picked out. I pick out the value. I give it a description. I tell it how often I want to check on that registry key to make sure that that registry key stays the same. But I can also monitor for any changes that get made to the registry. I can monitor things like logging on and logging off of these servers as well. So I've got a very detailed bit that I can monitor there as well. Then I move over into the performance graphs. And again, performance, looking at performance and looking at things like the ability to monitor specific performance counters. So I'm looking at a protected virtual machine here, and I can go ahead and expand all of these performance counters that are available to me that I want to collect, and ultimately be able to assign or measure alerts and monitoring rules against these things. Now I can also create sort of my own dashboard here as well, where I'm able to go ahead and once I've selected a group of these things for monitoring, I can then go ahead and create a series of graphs that will go ahead and allow me to actually visualize what's happening, and ultimately look at things like a rolling average of things like average disk queue length or CPU utilization, or those types of events. And I've got a couple of those that I've configured here. If I look at combined disk queue length for this particular virtual machine, and I want to go back in time to the 21st, what will happen is it will go ahead and replay what that looked like, and allow me to go ahead and get a sense for what this looks like. And I can open up another graph here that I can look at CPU or processor status, and I can take this back to the 21st as well. And I'll do this in real time as well. But if I want to look at or try and diagnose a problem, there's my graph running on one side that's replaying my average disk queue length. Here's my graph running my CPU utilization. And I can click open here again, and I can get into things like database transactions a second if I want to, and replay this. So I can look at all these elements and start to get an understanding of, if I've narrowed down where the potential performance bottleneck is, replay this information, try and get an understanding of what may have been happening at the time the problem occurred, and really sort of start to pinpoint what's going on. Or I could simply create this dashboard of key elements that I want to monitor and just keep this up on my screen, so that not only am I going to get those alerts proactively when something goes wrong, but I can actually have an operator monitoring this as well. Some of the other elements of the product, guys, a fairly robust reporting engine as well. So, if you want to go ahead and do things like receive a report, in this case here, I've got a memory utilization report coming to me every morning, but I want to look at things like the IP service availability. So I want to look at that availability panel, and I want to look at, for example, ping. So I can look at any one of these, but let's choose ping. I'll select all the devices, and I'll have a starting date of 8/22, and I'll report on the last 1 day and 12 hours. So what it'll do is it'll go out and give me a report on the availability pieces or the availability tests that were run as part of that one screen where we were constantly pinging. And I can come in here and I can look at that report. And again, the frequency I get every 5 minutes. I'm checking combined demo with a ping. And this is the latency that I was looking at over the course of this 18-hour period. Same thing with demo. I'm pinging, and this is what the steady state latency looked like down here, and this is what the operational state was. Did I have any failures? Again, this is the type of reporting you can have delivered directly to your inbox. And anything that we monitor on, we can report on. So you can get all that information there as well. And then lastly is log management. And one of the things that we found incredibly useful here is the ability to go ahead and have a centralized logging server, and to be able to manage event logs, to be able to manage syslog messages, to be able to do things like archive event logs. So to get those things published here and then be able to archive them and be able to search them, to view the current event logs, to come in here and be able to do that and basically do a search for the, slice and dice those event logs very easily. Same thing with syslog messages, and be able to archive those for compliance purposes. But to be able to have a single dashboard where all those messages are coming in, and then I've only got one place to go to. So it doesn't matter if I want to look at the application log for a given, protected virtual machine, I can come in here and I can do that. And I don't know that I've got anything in here because I don't know that I've redirected this. But I could certainly do that and get a view for that and go ahead and see what's been published. So again, a very easy way to go through and be able to grab these messages, to be able to understand what these messages are, and ultimately be able to go through and search these things from a single tool, we feel like is incredibly powerful for the customer. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to include that level of management as well. So guys, with that said, I wanted to go ahead and give you guys just the overview. And I know some of you are probably out there looking for a more deep dive, and we're happy to go ahead and set that up. We'd encourage you to, contact your Marathon sales representative. We'll set up a one-on-one deep dive so that you can sort of get an understanding of, sort of how all this comes together. One of the things I did want to make time to do, though, is look through and see if you guys had any questions, and really make sure that if you did have questions that we could answer them. If there are questions that I don't get to, quite frankly, if you asked a question and I didn't answer it, it might be because I don't know the answer yet, but I'll get back to you and make sure that you get what you need. So just looking through here, a couple of the questions. Do you support SQL mirroring settings and always-on settings? We do. So if you've configured Microsoft SQL Server in the latest edition of SQL Server with their always-on and mirroring, we can monitor those processes. We can monitor and drill right down. Now, I don't have one of those set up here in this demo environment, but if you're the person that did ask that question, feel free to reach back out to us, because I do have it set up in another environment, and I'd be happy to walk you through that to make sure you understand that. But we certainly do. And I got another question here. Does MX monitoring integrate with Microsoft System Center? I think Microsoft System Center acts as one of those enterprise level frameworks that we talked about. So the short answer to that is yes, it does. At this point, the integration is more of we're acting as an intermediary and able to pass those things up to System Center, but we are going ahead and able to do that. Let's see here. Let's see if there are any other questions here. If I have a client with 300 devices that I need to monitor, and let me see what and I think we're getting to a pricing question here. In terms of pricing, guys, what I would do in terms of certainly the product scales to that and beyond. But if you have a question on that type of pricing, I would reach out to either your authorized distributor, your Marathon distributor, or reach out directly to a Marathon sales representative through an authorized partner, and they can give you that information or get you in the right direction. And obviously, when we talk about our pricing, we're talking about something that, if you look at it compared to others, is extremely competitive. I've been asked not to discuss pricing specifically on this webinar because I think what we want to do is we want to understand what the needs are and make sure that we get you what you need from a requirements perspective. So, guys, with that said, and there are other questions here, guys. I know you guys, others have asked questions that I'm looking through here, and I will follow up with each one of you on a one-off basis. I'll be sending out emails to each of you individually to answer your questions. The one question I did see in here was, "We'll need the presentation." Absolutely. You will be posting this to the partner portal, the actual PowerPoints, in the next 48 hours. So hopefully no later than Monday. But they should be up hopefully tomorrow. But the recording as well. So we're gonna place a recording of this session up there as well, so that you can replay it or send it along to your colleagues. I'll also be sending out a thank you email for coming with all of my contact information. So if you have questions about the product, or you want something more in depth, or if you forgot to ask a question here, you could certainly reach out to me directly, and I can get you all the information that you need. Guys, with that, I want to wrap up and let everyone get back to their day. I really appreciate everybody's time and coming out today and looking at sort of this product. We're really excited here at Marathon to make, put this product into the marketplace as an extension of our overall availability suite of services. Again, really appreciate all the time and really hope to work with each one of you in the future as we go through and bring this product to market and really market it to our customers alongside of our flagship everRun MX. Appreciate everyone's time today, and we'll talk to you all real soon. Thank you.